Hey everybody, welcome to More Fun Comics, where it's not just fun, it's more fun. I'm going to try something a little different this week. Instead of looking at a single comic, we'll look at them as a set. On the exam table today is a landmark DC story, the original DC Crisis, The Crisis on Infinite Earths, published in the mid-'80s, which means it's not too far from its 40th birthday. This was a huge event in DC continuity that changed everything for more than 20 years before another crisis changed it back, and another crisis, and another crisis, and another crisis. Not to be forgotten is the impeccable pedigree of talent who created it. I bought this 12-issue set a couple of months ago for $75. Is it a treasure or a toss-off? Let's find out right now. Hey everybody, welcome to More Fun Comics, a webcast dedicated to promoting the joys, the secret pleasures, the hidden passions, and the forbidden desires of comic book collecting. I'm Dirk 20-year comic book retailer, lifelong comic book fan, and comic collecting hobby advocate, and impresario extraordinaire. Since I buy them to read, I love finding comics in complete sets. It's great to have a complete story, and it's easier and almost always cheaper than dealing with individual issues. Sets don't always have to be self-contained miniseries like this one. They could be great story arcs or great artists doing a story arc within an ongoing series. As we look through more comics in the future, we'll be coming back to sets a lot. At this comic book shop, we're more interested in getting a great comic book and getting great value. So we'll be focusing mostly on mid-grade books between 4.0 and 7. Assuming a bell curve, these are the grades that are probably most available in the wild. Certainly with a book like this, which is published far later than a lot of the other books we've looked at, the expectation is that you're going to find these, for the most part, in the higher scale. There are a lot of them that are beat up, but there are also a lot of them available that were taken care of and should be in the 7.0 range. In the early 1980s, DC knew they had a continuity problem. To keep up with their changing audience over 50 years, DC began splitting their universe into different dimensions. Earth 1 was the current age, Earth 2 was the golden age, etc. There was even Earth X, where the superheroes were freedom fighters against the Axis powers who won World War II. Crossovers between the worlds were frequent and popular, but so many crossovers were accruing that continuity was a complete jumble. The decision was made, something had to be done to simplify the DC universe, and DC's 50th anniversary seemed like a good time to do it. It's been well documented that DC and Marvel frequently and shamelessly imitate each other. No good idea goes unstolen in the comic business, and it should come as no surprise that the first issue of the DC universe-wide 12-issue Hootenanny was released the same month as Marvel's universe-wide 12-issue Hootenanny Secret Wars was successfully wrapping up. Marvel's series was notable for the first appearance of Spider-Man's black costume, which eventually evolved into the highly bankable Venom. This issue was an early inductee into the Plastic Comic Vault Hall of Fame. At the time, Marvel didn't have to worry about a multiverse because they'd only been around since the early 60s, and everything was very linear for them. Marvel characters were anchored in the real world, which made it easy for stories to flow and evolve based on what was happening at the time. DC characters occupied a made-up world with cities like Metropolis and Gotham. Along with every character, every world had to be reimagined for every new era, essentially creating a new Earth to which our focus shifts, leaving the old world to continue its evolutionary path unobserved until there was a crossover. There were Marvel heroes during World War II, but other than Captain America, who was frozen in ice for 20 years, and Submariner, who was a mutant, very few of them were in the current continuity. Marvel eventually adopted a multiverse, but the development was based not on story needs, but on the vast amount of wealth it could generate. DC's multiverse is a library, Marvel's is a cash register. Secret Wars was basically a story of all the Marvel heroes and villains and a godlike being pitted against each other. Marvel's heroes had teamed up before, but never all of them in one place. It was basically a giant four-color free-for-all. Although the structural and marketing strategies were an imitation of Marvel, Crisis on Infinite Earths wasn't, because there was a whole universe of Earths with long continuity and evolved characters available. What's basically happening is a growing and unstoppable singularity of nothingness is racing across the multiverse. Earth after Earth being totally erased. Within the first few pages, Earth 3, a planet run by the evil JLA doppelgangers called the Crime Syndicate, is completely wiped from existence. The singularity is headed for our universe. If superheroes from across the infinite Earths can't stop it, what chance do our heroes have? So let's take a look at Crisis on Infinite Earths. We'll do something a little different than we normally do since we're evaluating a set. We won't be looking at each individual issue as to its quality. This series, as I said, is from the mid-'80s, and by this time, the expectation is that the comics were being handled a little better. So for the most part, you should be able to find a fairly decent set that should be up around the upper level of the More Fun Comics sweet spot of 7.0. As we kind of look through here, we'll see if that's about where we can hit with this one and see how well we do. You can't, you don't want to look through every issue unless you have time or you're buying something that's much more valuable. You can just kind of go through and look through the covers and check the spines out and check everything out. It's going to give you a general idea of the overall quality of the set. So ideally, probably you should take a look at the worst copy in the thing, get an idea of what that is, and then assume that everything else is better. So, or the other idea might be to look at a couple of the key issues, which this one has a couple of key issues. Once you look at the key issues and see what kind of grade they're, and then again, you've got kind of a general idea. So we're just going to take a look at, but as I said, this is art by George Perez, and we're just going to have to spend some time looking at George Perez's amazing art, and you can see the number of heroes that he actually draws into on the cover, and he also does it on the interior of the book, and every one of them is completely accurately rendered. So that's issue 12. This is issue 11. No, I'm sorry. That's issue 10. Spectre. There's issue 11. There's an issue 4. Issue 3. There's a lot of heroes in that one. Issue 2. Here's a good one, and we'll kind of take a look at this one a little closer so you can kind of see the work that Perez does. There's pretty much just about every villain you can imagine on this cover, but it's just one of the all-time great mass of people covers. So definitely a Perez masterpiece. Here's another great one, number 5, that we'll take a look at. With this cover, you get a real good idea of what a master Perez is. Heroes, villains, all drawn together. There is the main villain of the entire story, the Anti-Monitor. And a gruesome thing he is. And again, another fantastic cover by Perez. And then these final two issues are probably the issues that are the notable ones that you would call key issues. And this would be the death of the Flash, and this would be the death of Supergirl. That's a pretty famous cover right there. It's definitely been imitated many, many times. I'm sure it's some kind of imitation of something else. But real famous cover. And probably the most important issue in the series, and as is the Flash. I chose this one because there seems to be a thing that happens in comic sets when you're buying stuff like this. Is the one issue that's like the most important one always seems to be the lowest quality, although that's probably just a statistical anomaly. I'm sure it's a random thing, but in any case, this one, not only was it a key issue, but it's also showing some characteristics that I just wanted to point out. I'm not going to spend a lot of time looking at this, but a few things that are notable on this particular cover that you might be looking for as you look through not only this particular set, but really any comic from the 80s and the 90s. So this is one of the key issues where Barry Allen, the Flash, dies. And as all comic book fans know from long experience, once a superhero of the caliber of Barry Allen as the Flash is dead, he is dead forever. never to return. So it's kind of a dramatic last issue. It's tough for some of us comic fans. We'll never forget Barry. But it's important that we look at this issue anyways, because there are just a couple of things. I'm not going to grade this issue. Just looking at it right now, I'm going to say a 7. And really, honestly, I don't care, because it's a whole set, as long as they're all in, not in beat up shape. But like this one, for example, it's got these little creases here on the corner, and you'll see that. And in the context of a set, that may not be a big deal. On individual issues, it's something to pay a little closer attention to. But other than that, it's real clean. It's real sharp. There's a little tiny crease in the corner there, which doesn't count. Cover appeal, 7.0, solid, easy. And if the rest of the set is anywhere like this, then you can apply your umbrella grade to it and determine whether or not it's worth it based on what you know about the value of these things. I'm not going to spend a lot of time going through this book, but I just wanted to go through to look a couple pages of how great the Perez art is in it. Just as an example, multiply whatever you see here times 12, and actually probably more like times 14 if you consider the density of what he puts in a book. And then we find, real quick, just to show you, the pages are still pretty white. So there's really no issue with that, as there shouldn't be with a book of this particular age. So that's probably not much of a thing. But we get a good shot of Perez doing Darkseid here. And interestingly, the fourth world, Darkseid's world, really doesn't have that much to do with what goes on in the entire story. So they kind of mention them as a side thing, and Darkseid's, of course, always ready for it. But the entire universe is getting destroyed, and it's unclear whether it's going to affect Darkseid or not. And the main villain is the Anti-Monitor, who is here. And this is a real good example of, again, the amount of detail that goes into a drawing. Just the awesomeness of the detail in this page, topped off with the Anti-Monitor's eyes, and then we kind of see, his domain. But just the incredible detail that goes into full page panel. And there he is in all his hideousness. So I'm not going to bore you with all the details of what's happening, but you can see there's a swirling ball of energy, and Flash is needed to in some way counter that energy, and it could save everything. So he does, and runs faster and faster and faster and faster, and eventually explodes everything. But at what cost? Because while the Monitor still stands, the Flash himself has been running so fast that he's essentially burned out his life energy. And subsequently, in a very important panel, as panels go in DC history, the rapid decay of Barry Allen and the end of Barry Allen's The Flash forever. But just in case you were worried, the Challengers of the Unknown make an appearance. George Perez. And the final page, which is an awesome one. A major character in DC as far as power goes makes his first appearance. And obviously he's distressed. So, great issue. Everything good is about it. It was a lot of fun to get and a lot of fun to read. And a lot of people were talking about it when it happened. So, the whole series is really good. So what are we looking at as far as what a series like this might cost you? Well, I looked them up in Overstreet, and I added all the, say, at a 6.0, which is a totally acceptable level to buy a comic just for reading and collecting. It books them out at about $81 for the entire set, which obviously some of the key ones being a little higher. If we look on eBay, you can find them in sets. You can find individual issues too, but you do find a lot of sets. So it's, in this particular instance, for me anyways, it's worth it just to buy the set. than to mess around with individual issues, unless you find them super cheap, which you probably can. This one went for under $60 and with $7.75 shipping. So that's a pretty good price, whatever the person ended up getting. And then here's another set. This one went for $76, $8 shipping, so $84, which is about right, about what Overstreet says. So once again, kind of everything's aligning. And again, these are just really recent auctions, and these things vary all over the place. These are just like the top two I found. The great thing about this is if you're not into spending $80 for a set of comics, and no matter how cool they are, this is available in a trade paperback. And I just wanted to take a minute with this trade paperback because one of the notable things about it is the cover that Alex Ross does. And he does up George Perez and includes pretty much every character there is in existence in DC. And it is amazing to behold, and this trade paperback contains the entire 12 issues and is available, very, very likely available at your local comic book shop or your local library. Their comics don't have to be expensive. Get this one I'll leave it on the front, but it's on the back as well. I think at one point in time, you can see the Flash running here, and then as he moves through the panel towards on the front side, he's decaying. Just the unbelievable number of things going on in this particular piece of art is amazing. I believe they turned this into a poster. I don't know if it's still available or not, but it's certainly something worth having if you like staring at walls and picking superheroes out. Thanks for joining us. Next time, we are going to take a look at issue number 5 of Flash Gordon, which has great Al Williamson art, so we'll spend a lot of time on that. Al Williamson is without a doubt one of my all-time favorites, and some of these things and things that he's done can be found at great prices, and they're totally worth having. So we're going to take a look at that. And an episode after that, we're going to take a look at this goofy thing, another mad ripoff. This would be Marvel, who tried it a couple of times and came up with this, which didn't last very long at all. But there's some amusing cultural things in it, and it'd be fun to look at. So we appreciate you watching. Subscribe, like, please. We're looking to build our audience, and we have a lot more things to come up. Thanks for joining us. We'll see you next time.